I used to walk through the halls of Weston Estate as if it was still home. These days, my name isn't even on the mailbox. The front porch sagged under the weight of years and new ownership. I paused there, keys jangling in my palm before remembering they no longer fit anything that mattered. My duffel bag slid off my shoulder as I nudged the door open to the old tool shed behind the house. The smell of dust, cedar, and rust greeted me like a cruel welcome party. The main house loomed just 30 yards away, its white clapboard exterior glinting in the afternoon light. Laughter drifted from the back patio. Jason's voice, rich and booming, telling a joke that wasn't half as clever as he believed. I didn't need to look to know who laughed the loudest. Our mother, Linda. I placed the last box on a lopsided shelf and stood there, heart hammering in the silence. A gust of spring wind rattled the loose pane in the tiny window, and I found myself remembering Dad's voice. "This place belongs to both of you. Don't let it split you apart." He'd meant well, but he'd been naive. He never imagined Mom would choose sides, choose Jason, before the dirt had even settled over his grave. Dad had passed 6 weeks ago. The day after the funeral, Linda had handed me a neatly typed letter that still burned in my back pocket. "Given the transfer of property to Jason," it read, "you are welcome to reside temporarily in the rear storage quarters until further notice." She didn't sign it. Love, Mom. Just Linda Weston. Businesslike. Cold. I sank down on the makeshift cot, my knees brushing the underside of a shelf. Cobwebs dangled above my head. This place had once stored lawnmowers and sacks of rock salt. Now it stored me. Outside, Jason's toast began. I peeked through the dusty window slat and saw him in a crisp navy blazer, standing under the wisteria arbor Dad had built the summer I turned 15. "To new beginnings," Jason said, raising his glass. "To Weston Estate finally being where it belongs." Everyone applauded. No one looked toward the little shed in the back. It was humiliating. This erasure. Like I'd never been part of it. Like I hadn't sat with Dad every evening for weeks while cancer hollowed him out. Like I hadn't picked out the funeral music while Jason was too busy coordinating logistics. Like I hadn't existed. I closed the window and leaned against the splintered wood wall, breath catching in my throat. They hadn't just taken the house. They'd taken the narrative. Later that evening, when the party had dulled and the guests trickled out, I wandered back to the main house. I wasn't supposed to be there, but the porch light was still on, and no one had locked the side door, likely assuming I'd remember my place. The house creaked in the same familiar rhythm it had since childhood, but now it felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by betrayal. Dad's study remained almost untouched. The smell of pipe tobacco lingered faintly beneath the lavender air freshener someone had sprayed to erase him. I ran my fingers along the edge of his mahogany desk. Then I noticed it. One of the drawers didn't sit flush. Inside was a small wooden box, palm-sized, carved with an old family monogram, R&C, Rachel and Charles. My breath hitched. I hadn't seen that box in years. It creaked open on brass hinges, revealing a folded slip of yellowed paper. Dad's handwriting stared back at me, slanted and urgent. "Don't let them bury the truth." My hands trembled. The note was short, cryptic, and terrifying. Something deeper was wrong, beyond the will, beyond the favoring of Jason. I sat in Dad's old leather chair, letting the darkness of the room settle around me like a second skin. The chandelier above still held one burnt-out bulb, and the shadows stretched long across the floor. I didn't hear Jason come in. "You know you're not supposed to be in here," he said, his voice like oil slick on pavement, smooth but dangerous. I turned slowly, closing the box and tucking it behind my back. "I was just remembering," I said. He smiled tightly, eyes flicking down to the desk. "Reminiscing won't change anything. The estate's settled. Linda and I have plans. You should be thinking about your next move." I stood, heart pounding but voice steady. "I thought this place was for both of us." He shrugged. "You thought wrong. This isn't a charity. Dad wanted someone responsible to carry it on. And there it was, the lie he told himself to sleep at night. That he'd earned this, that I hadn't. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. The box dug into my spine as I slipped out the side door into the cool Vermont night. Back in the shed, I stared at the note until the words blurred. A new beginning, Jason had called it. A clean slate. A new rule of power. A campaign of erasure. But I'd found the first crack. A whisper from the grave. A secret. And secrets never stay buried. Jason's voice still echoed in my ears as I watched the last of the porch lights flicker off from my window. A new beginning. And finally, the house is in the right hands. They said I was family, but made sure to remind me which door I couldn't use. Morning light filtered through the cracks in the tool shed's warped walls, illuminating the dust that danced with every sigh of the wind. I pulled the thin quilt tighter around my shoulders and stared up at the ceiling, counting knots in the exposed wooden beams. Each one felt like a tally of all the ways I'd been pushed aside. I remembered last Christmas. I'd spent the entire day in the kitchen, basting turkey, setting out dishes, hand-washing Grandma's china because Linda insisted it showed respect for tradition. Jason had stumbled in late, reeking of bourbon and still wrapped in a scarf I'd knit him years ago. He dropped a store-bought bottle of wine on the counter, muttered something about traffic, and Linda had beamed like he'd parted the Red Sea. "You've always had a generous heart," she said to him, ignoring the sweat on my brow, the ache in my back. "This family owes so much to you." It wasn't just favoritism. It was a script. And I'd been cast as the background character in my own life. That morning, as I brushed my teeth with bottled water and tried to ignore the mildew seeping up from the corners, there was a knock on the shed door. Linda. She stood there in a pressed blouse, her lipstick flawless even at 9 in the morning. She didn't step inside, just looked around the edges, nose twitching at the smell of damp wood and boxed-up grief. "You've made it cozy," she said flatly. "I've made it habitable," I replied, setting the toothbrush aside. Linda's gaze landed on the cot, then on the electric kettle I'd salvaged from a thrift store in town. "You'll want to find something more suitable soon. A woman your age." I said nothing. There was nothing to say that wouldn't explode between us like dry kindling. She left as quickly as she came, her perfume lingering longer than her concern. Once the door shut, I sat down on a paint-splattered crate and tried to center myself. That's when I noticed it. A frame half buried beneath an old tarp and some rusted gardening shears. I pulled it free and brushed away the grime. It was a photo of Aunt Claire, Dad's sister. She died when I was a teenager, but I remembered her vividly. Her laughter, her bright scarves, the way she always listened like your words mattered. In the photo, she stood with Dad beside the lake, both of them barefoot, beaming. A line was etched in black ink across the bottom. "To Claire, the one who remembers." My breath caught. Claire had always been the family's memory keeper. Dad used to say she remembered everything. Birthdays, promises, regrets. If anyone knew what he'd intended, it would have been her. But she was gone. Still, the message lingered. Who wrote it? Dad? Was it a clue? Fueled by a new restlessness, I slipped into the main house while Jason was out. He'd left early to meet the estate lawyer, as he'd mentioned in passing over breakfast, Linda made just for him. I wasn't invited. I moved quietly through the study, eyes scanning for anything I'd missed. Then I saw it, on the edge of the desk, almost too obvious to be real. A letter-sized envelope, thick and sealed, with my father's initials scrawled in the corner. It was addressed to Jason. I opened it. Inside were crisp official documents, estate transfer papers. Everything from the land to the investments had been moved into Jason's name, dated just 1 week after Dad's diagnosis. My stomach twisted. Dad hadn't even started chemo then. Had he been coerced? Had he known? Footsteps echoed in the hallway. I shoved the papers back into the envelope and darted out the side door, heart hammering. The sun was too bright. The birdsong too cheerful. It all felt like mockery. Back in the shed, I pulled out the wooden key, the one I'd found in Dad's desk the night before. My fingers trembled as I turned to the old drawer in the metal file cabinet that had come from Dad's workshop. The key slid in smoothly. It clicked. Inside was a single torn envelope, faded and creased. On the front, in Dad's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "Last will, draft." My hands froze. The paper inside had been torn unevenly, as if someone had ripped it in haste or fury. But part of it remained, and what it said would change everything. The house groaned in the wind as if it, too, was holding a breath it couldn't yet release. If you listen hard enough, even silence has a voice. My father was speaking through the walls, just not in ink. I sat on the floor of the shed, the torn envelope still clutched in my hand like some ancient artifact dredged from a long-forgotten tomb. The ripped piece of the will trembled between my fingers, but it said just enough to set my heart racing. My name had been on it. There was no mistaking that. And below it, scribbled in my father's careful print, were the words, "For Rachel, fair share guaranteed." I couldn't sleep that night. Not with the wind rattling the tin roof and my mind spinning with questions. Who had torn it? When? And why wasn't the real will filed with the town records? If Jason had gotten the estate through legal channels, then what was this doing hidden away, incomplete and buried in a drawer only I had the key to? By morning, I had a plan. The Weston Town Hall stood like a proud old relic in the center of the village, a red brick building with sun-bleached flags fluttering out front and a quiet hush inside that hadn't changed in decades. I walked up the creaky stairs to the clerk's office, where I found the door locked and the window dusty. A note said, "Please inquire at the library for public record access." The library, of course. It smelled of paper and lemon polish. My kind of place. I passed rows of old microfilm machines and settled at a computer in the back. After a few false starts and a mild bout of frustration with the outdated interface, I found the probate archives. I typed in, "Frank Weston, Last Will and Testament." No results. I tried variations. Weston Estate, Franklin Weston, Weston Frank. Still nothing. My stomach dropped. Nothing had been filed. That wasn't just odd. It was illegal. People didn't just die with estates of that size and leave nothing in the records. Even a draft would have left a paper trail. I printed the empty search results and headed to the reference desk, where a silver-haired man with half-moon glasses looked up and smiled. "Looking for something special?" he asked. "I'm not sure," I said cautiously. I was trying to find a will. For Frank Weston. The man paused, then smiled again. Smaller this time. "You're Rachel, aren't you? You're his daughter." I blinked. "Yes." He extended a hand. "Harold Timmons. I used to be town clerk. Retired a few years ago, but I still volunteer here on Thursdays." Something about his tone told me he knew more than he was letting on. "I remember your father," Harold said. "A sharp man. Quiet, but sharp." "Did he ever file anything here? A will, maybe?" Harold scratched his chin. "He scheduled an appointment, actually. March 4th. Said he wanted to submit something. Looked official. Had the sealed envelope and everything. But he canceled that morning." "Did he say why?" "Number just changed his mind, I suppose. Or someone changed it for him." "Do you remember if anyone else came with him? Anyone who might have influenced?" Harold cut me off gently. "You want to be careful, Rachel. Your family name still carries weight around here, but not always the kind you want." That warning sat heavy in my chest as I returned to the shed, my boots crunching over gravel that felt more like broken glass. I poured a mug of instant coffee and stared at the dusty boxes lining the walls. Somewhere in this mess, I needed to find the thread that pulled everything together. I turned my attention to the old filing cabinet Dad had used in his workbench days. I hadn't looked through all the drawers, mostly because they were jammed, rusted shut, or too full to budge. But now I dug in, pulling out faded schematics, old screws in jars, And finally, a cassette recorder, half buried under a set of chisels and a leather-bound sketchbook. It was an old Radio Shack model, the kind Dad used for dictating late-night ideas when he was still sketching designs for custom woodwork. I flipped it over. There was a cassette inside. My pulse surged. I pressed play. For a moment, there was only silence, a crackle, a mechanical hum. Then, his voice, clear, steady, unmistakable. "If you're hearing this, something isn't right." I froze. Dad. "I never trusted digital records," his voice continued. "Too easy to delete, too easy to fake. But this is mine." He paused. A breath. "I intended to file my will with the town clerk. Rachel knows where my draft is, and I know she'll understand why I couldn't trust Linda or Jason with it." My throat tightened. Rachel deserves what's hers. I've done everything I can to leave the signs behind. If they try to fight her, she'll know who to call. The tape clicked off. I sat in stunned silence, the recorder still humming faintly in my lap. "Who to call?" The words echoed in my mind, louder than any scream. What did he mean? A lawyer? A confidant? Someone who still had power even after his death? Claire. The photo from yesterday flashed in my mind. To Claire, the one who remembers. Had he told her something? Left something with her? I grabbed my phone and searched for old records. Claire had died 10 years ago, but her name came up in a few articles about local community work, a women's shelter, a trust fund she'd helped set up. And one listing, a tiny charity listed at her old address, now managed by someone named Evelyn Merriweather. I'd found my lead. The shadows in the shed had stretched longer now, crawling across the walls like secrets waiting to be dragged into the light. You don't realize how invisible you've become until your family drafts legal paperwork to erase you? The rain hadn't let up all morning. It tapped relentlessly against the windshield as I pulled into the gravel parking lot of Harlan and Associates, though Associates seemed generous for a single-story building with one door and a crooked sign. The windows were fogged, and the air carried that stale scent of old paper and floor wax when I stepped inside. It was the kind of place where time moved slower, where truths had a way of sticking to wood-paneled walls and clinging to dust. I had called earlier and been told Evan Harlan could squeeze me in between depositions. I didn't have a briefcase or legal jargon, just a manila folder full of questions and ghosts. "Rachel Weston?" A voice called from a narrow hallway. I stood up. The man before me looked to be in his early 40s, dressed in a worn suit that hadn't seen tailoring in years, but his eyes were sharp, alert. "Evan Harlan," he introduced himself, leading me to an office that smelled faintly of espresso and legal pads. The blinds were half drawn, casting slatted shadows on the floor. "What brings you in today?" I sat across from him and slid the folder onto his desk. "I think my father's will was destroyed, or hidden, and I think my family erased me from it." Evan didn't blink. "Go on." I started with the letter from Linda, the one that framed my presence on the property as temporary, as if I were a guest and not a daughter. Then came the envelope, torn but unmistakable, bearing the words, "Last Will Draft," and my name. I told him about the cassette, about my father's voice declaring that something had gone wrong, that I should have received something. Evan listened in complete silence, his fingers steepled under his chin. I could tell he'd done this before. Absorbed pain through paperwork, translated injustice into affidavits. When I finished, he leaned back and exhaled slowly. "Let's start with the basics. Did your father ever file a will through a known attorney?" I shook my head. "Not that I've found. Nothing is on public record." "Then we're in gray territory." He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick red folder labeled Probate Basics. Handwritten wills, also called holographic wills, can be valid in Vermont, but only if they meet specific requirements. We'd need clear handwriting, a signature, ideally witnesses. But the cassette? He paused. "That's unique. Potentially persuasive in court, especially if the voice can be verified." I took the tape recorder from my bag and placed it between us. He says my name, says I should have had something. He says if they fight me, I'll know who to call. Evan turned the recorder over carefully, inspecting it like a forensic tech. That statement implies intent. It's not a formal bequest, but it could demonstrate your father's mindset. His wishes. That matters. He paused. Do you have any evidence your mother interfered? Any documentation, emails, letters? I hesitated. Not yet, but I reached into my coat pocket and slid out the photo I'd found. Claire and Dad, standing together outside what looked like a community fundraiser. Behind them, a wooden sign that read, Merriweather Women's Shelter. And in my father's hand, clear as day, was the small carved key with R and C etched into its face. This key opened a drawer in his desk, I explained. It was where I found the torn envelope. Evan studied the photo closely. Claire is my aunt. She passed away years ago, but she was close to my dad. And that key, it's a pair. I have it now. She had the other. He set the photo down, visibly more intrigued. Rachel, if your father trusted Claire and left breadcrumbs like this for you to find, then it wasn't accidental. It suggests a conscious effort to bypass whoever he didn't trust. Probably your mother and your brother. I nodded. Exactly. And when I spoke to Harold, the former town clerk, he said my father had scheduled an appointment to submit something official, then canceled the same day. Evan's brow lifted. Who else knew about that appointment? No one, unless Linda saw it on his calendar. He leaned back, linking his fingers behind his head. And you believe she convinced him to cancel it? I believe she either scared him out of it or destroyed it afterward. I don't think she ever intended for me to inherit anything. For a long moment, the room fell quiet. Outside, the rain had intensified, tracing silvery lines down the window pane like veins under skin. Evan finally nodded. This is unusual, but not hopeless. He stood, walked to a bookshelf, and pulled a black binder. Inside were case precedents, pages tabbed and highlighted in meticulous detail. I've seen situations where intent carried weight, he said, where tapes, notes, and circumstantial evidence helped reconstruct the truth. If your father left behind enough of a trail and we can show that someone actively interfered, we might have a case. He turned back to me, eyes sharp now, voice firmer. This isn't just a hunch anymore. You have a draft, a key, a tape, a potential confidant. And if we find a pattern of exclusion or manipulation, I interrupted. Jason celebrated the estate as his the night of the funeral. My mother never even told me what was left. I'm living in a shed. He offered a humorless smile. Then it's time we bring this out of the shed. I opened my bag again, took out my notebook. I showed him my list. Names, times, clues, photos. He didn't laugh, didn't scoff, just nodded as he read. At last, he said it. Then we're not chasing ghosts, we're building a case. Aunt Claire opened the door wearing the same blue cardigan from the photograph. I knew you'd come, she said softly. Your father was afraid you'd be the only one. The air smelled like cedar and thyme. Her house was modest, tucked at the edge of a wooded lane just outside Weston. Pale curtains fluttered in the breeze from a cracked window. Inside, the rooms were cluttered with memory. Stacks of old newspapers, photo albums, carefully labeled boxes with masking tape and faded Sharpie. It was like walking into an archive where the past had been lovingly, perhaps obsessively, preserved. I hadn't seen Claire in years. She hadn't come to the funeral. I hadn't asked why. Tea? She asked, guiding me through narrow hallways toward the kitchen. Yes, please. My voice sounded small in her presence, less because of size, more because of gravity. Claire always held herself with a quiet authority. She had been my father's sister and his confidant. I knew that now more than ever. We sat at a small round table with peeling edges. The tea steamed between us, untouched. You look like him, she said, especially when you're trying not to be angry. I tried to smile. Failed. Claire reached down beside her chair and pulled out a small wooden box. Not ornate, just plain pine, worn at the corners with a small metal clasp. She placed it gently on the table and opened it. Inside was a folded fax, yellowed slightly, creased so many times the edges had begun to fray. She passed it to me. I unfolded it. The letterhead read, Benedict, Rios, and Chapman, estate law. The date was 3 weeks before my father died. It confirmed an appointment scheduled under Frank Weston's name to discuss and file final documentation, specifically a will. There was an appointment, I whispered. She nodded. And then suddenly, he canceled. My chest tightened. Linda. She found out. I was there when he told her. I could feel the room change. Cold. Calculated. She smiled, Rachel. She smiled and said, We'll handle it as a family. Claire's voice trembled slightly at the memory. I looked up. Why didn't you stop her? I tried. Your father asked me to be a witness. Linda shut that down. She threatened to accuse me of coercion. Said she'd drag my name through the press. And your brother, he just watched. Claire stood, moved to the corner cabinet, and unlocked a drawer. She returned with a cassette, identical to the one I had played in my father's study. She held it with both hands, like it might burn her. He sent this to me the same week, said to keep it safe. I've only played it once. We set it in the same recorder I'd carried from Evan's office. I hit play. Silence, then static, then his voice. If you're hearing this, it means Rachel's asking questions. She always was the brave one. Claire's hands shook, and she pressed her lips together. I tried to do right by everyone. The recording continued, but I saw how they were circling. Linda, Jason. I wanted the land to go to Rachel, the main house. Not out of favoritism, but because she'd honor it. She'd protect it. More static. She doesn't know how strong she is. If they keep her from this, Claire, help her. The tape clicked to a stop. I sat in silence for a long time. The room seemed smaller now, more urgent. Claire's eyes were misted, but steady. He left you more than land, Rachel. He left you the truth. They buried it. You can dig it back up. I folded the fax and placed it into my bag. I picked up the cassette and looked at Claire. Are you willing to testify? Whatever you need. I nodded, stood. My heart pounded like a drum I hadn't heard in weeks. The pieces were aligning, my father's voice, the appointment, the witness. As I walked to the door, Claire called after me. He knew this wouldn't be easy. I turned back. But he also knew, she said, voice low and sure. You wouldn't let them win. I stepped out into the overcast afternoon, cassette and fax secure in my bag. My hands trembled, not with fear, but resolve. We're going to court. They think I'm still the quiet girl in the shadows. I told Evan. Let them. The words tasted like steel, sharp, cold, and inevitable. Evan didn't respond right away. He just nodded, then pushed the folder toward me across his cluttered desk. The scent of paper, toner, and rain drifted through the cracked window beside us. The small town law office felt more like a war room today. Let's start stringing the needle, he said. We've got threads. We just need a pattern. I opened the folder. Inside, photocopies of the fax from Claire's box, the cassette transcription I'd typed overnight in the shed, and a note Evan had written in bold marker, motive, means, opportunity. It was the kind of phrase I'd only ever heard in court dramas. Now it was my life. We spent the next hour laying everything out like a map. The canceled appointment with the law firm, Frank's recorded intentions, Claire's eyewitness account, and now, this. A sudden string of unusual withdrawals from my father's bank account in the 2 weeks before he died. Amounts that didn't match any prior pattern. One of them labeled only, consulting. They were draining him, I said under my breath, running a finger down the column. Evan leaned over. And the signatures? I flipped the statement and held it to the light. One signature stood out, looped, overconfident, slanted hard to the right. "Linda," I said. "Could be, but we'll need to verify with handwriting analysis." He tapped the page, then scribbled a note on a yellow pad. "If we can prove financial manipulation, especially tied to mental capacity during end of life, that's leverage." A ping sounded from his phone. A message from Claire. "Found the envelope. We'll drop off later today." We looked at each other. "She's a blessing," I said. "She's a lifeline," Evan replied. I leaned back, rubbing my temples. Every piece we found didn't ease the weight. It added to it. Because now I wasn't just chasing closure. I was chasing justice for a man who had died under the roof of betrayal. Later that afternoon, back in the shed, now officially transformed into my headquarters, I spread the evidence across my makeshift desk: the cassette, the faxes, the bank statements. Claire had dropped off a manila envelope with a single letter inside. Frank's handwriting, familiar and raw. "You'll know when to act. Don't wait for permission." I stared at the words for a long time. Evan called as I was organizing the files. "I got something." "Go on." The law firm confirmed the appointment was canceled from a phone number registered under Linda Weston, not Frank. My blood went cold. So she impersonated him? Not explicitly. She claimed she was his wife, calling on his behalf. Said he was no longer in condition to continue legal planning. I closed my eyes. And they accepted that? They didn't have reason to question it, until now. I sat down hard in the old wooden chair, the one that still creaked under weight and memory. Somewhere in the corner, my father's old coat still hung, dusty, untouched. I turned on the tape recorder again, listening to his voice for the 5th time that week. "This property is not just a house. It's my apology to her. For the years I didn't speak up. For letting silence pass as peace." I typed the line into a new document. I let the words sit on the screen like fresh ink on a confession. When Evan arrived an hour later, his face said everything. "This isn't about inheritance anymore," he said quietly. I didn't answer. He took the page I'd printed and read the quote aloud. Then he looked at me and said what we both already knew. "This is the suppression of a dying man's will. It's theft of truth. That makes it war." Jason calls, for the first time in a week. "You're not going through with this," he says. "It'll destroy Mom." I stood at the edge of the porch, my phone pressed to my ear, the Vermont dusk folding around me like wet linen. The wind carried the sharp scent of pine and storm, and the horizon had begun its quiet warning, clouds thickening like secrets about to break. "What do you care about Mom's feelings?" I asked. "Since when?" Jason chuckled. "Since you decided to make her the villain in a family soap opera." I stared across the yard toward the estate, the big house glowing warm behind curtained windows. In another life, I used to think of it as home. Now it looked like a stranger wearing my father's coat. "Rachel," he said again, softer this time. "Let it go. Come back inside. We'll sort this out like adults." He always did this. I could still hear his 12-year-old voice in my head, whispering after he broke my art tablet. "Don't cry. I'll fix it before Mom sees." Except he never fixed anything. I had to. Alone. "I'm not letting it go," I said. "Not this time." His voice lost its softness. "You're going to regret this." Then he hung up. The next morning, the town of Weston woke to a headline that wrapped its claws around every porch and diner counter from the bakery to the bookstore. Rachel Weston, the woman who mothered a queen for money. I saw it through the window of the cafe when I went to pick up coffee. The barista, young, freckles dotting her nose, froze when she saw me. She didn't hand me my usual cup. Inside, 3 older women clustered near the community bulletin board, newspaper in hand, whispering not so softly. "She was always a bit withdrawn," one said. "She's dragging her mother to court," another murmured. "Over what? Greed?" I walked out without my coffee. Back at the shed, I found Claire sitting on the steps, envelope in her lap, hands trembling. "I got this," she said quietly. The envelope was unmarked except for her name in block letters. Inside, a single sheet of paper with cut-out letters pasted ransom note style. "Old women shouldn't dig up dead things." I gritted my teeth. "They're trying to scare us." Claire met my eyes. "They're trying to make you back down. That's different." The article wasn't random. Linda and Jason had fired their first real shot. Through a reporter who owed them favors, no doubt. And like cowards, they'd done it without signing their names. That night, I sat at the little kitchen table in the shed, the cassette tape sitting between my hands. Rain tapped gently at the tin roof, like fingers too polite to knock. Evan called. "I saw the article," he said. "They're not subtle," I replied. "You okay?" "No." Pause. "Good." I closed my eyes, exhaled. "File it. Officially." His voice hardened. "Then get ready. They won't fight back. They'll come bury you." The thick, stamped final folder. Weston sues Weston. The folder sat on Evan's desk like a bomb waiting for its pin to be pulled. It wasn't large, just over 24 pages. But the weight of it couldn't be measured in paper. This was legacy. Blood. Silence breaking. Rachel stared at her name typed neatly above the signature line. Her fingers itched with nerves, but she didn't hesitate. Not this time. She picked up the pen and signed. Plaintiff, Rachel Weston. Evan let out a slow breath, then tapped the folder twice like a gavel. "It's filed. It's real. There's no undoing this." "Good," she said, though her stomach twisted. "I don't want to undo it." Outside, the sky had taken on a leaden color, threatening rain again, or maybe just mirroring the mood inside the legal office. A storm was coming, but she had finally stopped running from the wind. They drove together to the Weston County Courthouse. The air was sharp, and Rachel's coat didn't feel warm enough. As they stepped through the front doors, her boots squeaked slightly against the polished tile floor. The court clerk glanced up from her desk and blinked at the names on the cover sheet. "Weston Vera Weston?" she said aloud. Evan nodded. "That's right." She didn't ask questions, just stamped it and slid it into a metal tray. With a dull clunk, it became part of the record. Back at Jason's office, a sleek second-floor suite in the downtown block with floor-to-ceiling windows, he was on the phone, lounging in his leather chair. He'd just finished a meeting with investors for one of the family's new real estate projects, a green luxury development to be built on the western edge of Weston, ironically adjacent to the estate's original farmland. His assistant knocked, entered, and wordlessly handed him the envelope. His name was scrawled in blue ink across the front. Jason Weston, urgent. He slid it open. A copy of the court filing. The words stared back like a slap across the face. "Rachel," he muttered. He dialed his mother instantly. "You need to come see this." There was a pause on the line. Then Linda's voice. Smooth, composed. "I already have." "She filed, against us, against the family." "She wants to fight," Linda said, flat as ice. "Give her one." Rachel didn't sleep that night. She sat in her makeshift kitchen, cradling a mug of chamomile tea that had long since gone cold. Outside, wind clawed at the sides of the shed, tugging at the shutters. Somewhere in the estate, a sensor light clicked on. Jason must have driven home late. She pictured him storming up the steps, slamming doors, cursing her name. Let him. Let them both lose sleep. Evan had warned her. "They'll come with more than lawyers," he'd said. "They'll go after what you care about. They'll smear. They'll sabotage. They'll dig." And that's exactly what happened. 2 days after filing, Claire called. "They've sent someone," she whispered. "Who?" "I don't know. A man in a town car. Said he was looking for information about my property taxes. Asked if anyone else had keys to my house." Rachel's blood ran cold. "Do not let anyone in. I'll come by tomorrow. The smear article in the newspaper was only the beginning. Now they were playing dirtier. Meanwhile, in Jason's office, a new conversation unfolded. He sat at the edge of his desk, phone pressed tight against his jaw. I need to know what Claire has, he told someone. Letters, tapes, testimonies, whatever she thinks she has. We need it gone. The voice on the other end was muffled, but Jason's response was crystal clear. Find out what Claire knows, and turn it off. We never thought she'd go this far, the news anchor said. A daughter against her grieving mother. The screen flickered above the bakery counter, grainy with bad reception, but the words landed like a slap. Rachel stood frozen, a bag of scones clutched in her hand, eyes fixed on the local TV mounted to the corner beam. A slow zoom on her high school yearbook photo, taken when she was 17, awkward, hopeful, before loss hollowed her out. The anchor's voice dripped with performative sorrow. Once the pride of Weston's academic elite, now locked in a bitter court battle with her own family. Someone behind her whispered, "She used to tutor my niece, you know." Shame. Rachel dropped the scones back on the counter and walked out into the morning air, crisp and cruel. She didn't cry. Not here. The headline made the front page that afternoon. From honors to hoarders, Rachel Weston sues her family while living in a tool shed. They'd dug deep. The article described her temporary living arrangement in lurid detail. Boxes stacked to the ceiling, peeling paint, the scent of oil and mildew. There was even a quote from an unnamed source who claimed Rachel had once yelled at her mother in public, something that never happened. Evan called in a fury. They're manufacturing garbage. None of this would hold in court, but it's not about court. It's about perception. They want to make me look unstable, Rachel said. They want to make you disappear, Evan corrected. Meanwhile, Claire found an envelope on her porch. It wasn't handwritten this time. It was legal. The letter came from Linda's lawyer, formally accusing Claire of defamation and threatening a lawsuit unless she retracted her statements about Frank's will. Claire called Rachel in a panic. I don't know what to do. I didn't lie. I swear I didn't. I know, Claire, Rachel said, her voice tight. You told the truth. That's what they're punishing. Claire's voice trembled. They'll bankrupt me. I don't have a defense fund. We'll figure it out. But as she hung up, Rachel felt the tremor crawl into her own chest. At Evan's office, stacks of papers now occupied every surface. He was drafting responses to Linda's counterclaims, strategically timed to overwhelm them just days before the court's early hearing. Every day brought a new legal twist, a motion to dismiss, a petition to delay, an evidentiary challenge. They're flooding the field, Evan muttered, trying to wear us down. That night, Claire came to the shed, eyes red, knuckles raw from gripping the steering wheel. They sent another letter, she said, waving a second envelope. They're saying I'm not a credible witness because of my mental state. Can you believe that? After everything your father did for them, this is what I get. Rachel poured her tea with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Claire sat down and stared at the wall. Maybe we can't win this, Claire said, voice cracking. They have too much. Too many people. Too many lies. Too much money. Rachel didn't know how to answer. Her own strength was bleeding away, slowly, with every whisper in town, every stare at the grocery store, every article that twisted her into a caricature of herself. She waited until Claire left. Then she lit the old cassette player again and sat cross-legged in the dim shed. Her father's voice came through the static, worn but unmistakable. If they come at you hard, it means you're close. She sat there long after the tape ended, not moving, not crying, just breathing, because he was right. I wasn't looking for miracles, just for something they didn't erase. The morning light in the shed was muted by a soft fog, as if the world outside wanted to stay silent. Rachel sat at the workbench, sorting through the last of her father's personal boxes. The wooden drawers groaned with age. Some were empty. Others held only dust, rusted screws, and dried-out pens. She wasn't even sure what she was looking for anymore. She just needed something. Anything that said her father had truly meant for her to have this place. That his voice hadn't only existed in tape recorders and whispered memories. She tugged open one of the smaller drawers. It stuck halfway, wedged by something jammed in the back. She reached in, fingers brushing against rough wood, then something softer. A folded sheet? No, thicker than paper. It took effort, but eventually she freed it. It was a photograph, an old one. Her father, maybe 35, standing beside a half-built garden trellis. She was in the corner of the frame, 5 years old, her tiny hand clutching his pant leg. The frame was heavier than it looked, made of warped wood. As she turned it over to inspect, a faint tearing sound came from the back. The backing paper had loosened. Inside, tucked between the cardboard and the photo itself, was something else. A page. Folded once, stained by time, but unmistakably bearing her father's handwriting. Rachel's breath caught. She slid it free and opened it slowly, afraid the old paper might fall apart in her hands. It read, "This house is for Rachel. Not because she's my favorite, because she's the one who listens. She's the one who carries things the right way. I trust her to do right with what I built." At the bottom, a date. 2 weeks before he died. She didn't speak. Couldn't. The weight of that sentence pulled everything out of her chest. Not because she was his favorite, but because he trusted her. After months of being erased, ignored, belittled, he'd seen her. He'd known. She grabbed her coat and drove straight to Claire's. Claire was in her kitchen, boiling water for tea, the entire table covered in files and papers. She looked up as Rachel stepped in, holding the letter as if it were a live wire. Claire adjusted her glasses, took the page with careful fingers, and gasped. "I've seen this," she whispered. "I thought it was stolen. This was in the folder he showed me before he passed. He said it was his final draft, not the legal copy, but his truth." Her hands trembled. "I swear, Rachel, I thought it was gone." Rachel nodded, blinking back the flood in her eyes. It wasn't, it was just waiting. They called Evan immediately. By the time he arrived, he was out of breath and still wearing his tie from court. When Rachel handed him the letter, he read it once, then again, then carefully set it on the table as if it were a sacred text. "With this," he said slowly, "plus the cassette and Claire's statement, we can now show not only intent, but deliberate interference." Rachel looked down at the ink again. Her father's loops were a little crooked. The pen had skipped in places. But it was him. Undeniably. "This changes everything," Evan said. "We can verify handwriting through the notary files. We can challenge the transfer Jason filed as incomplete. It gives us standing. Real standing." Rachel's hand pressed to the page. "He didn't forget me," she said softly. "He fought for me. Now I'll fight back." Evan met her gaze. "Then it's time to bring it to court." "All rise." My knees didn't shake, but my heart did. The courtroom wasn't grand. No mahogany paneling or marble floors, just rows of benches worn from decades of small-town disputes, a flag pinned to the wall behind the judge's seat, and the stale scent of old paper and linoleum. But Rachel felt like she was walking into a coliseum, the kind where the lions were dressed in suits and carried clipboards. Evan stood beside her, calm but focused. His hands clasped a folder marked with a deep blue sticker. Rachel Weston versus Jason Weston et al. Across the aisle, Jason leaned back with one ankle over his knee, smirking like a man too comfortable. His suit was crisp, expensive. Linda sat beside him, her expression carved in stone. She didn't look at Rachel. Not once. Judge Halvers was already seated. He adjusted his glasses and gave a slow nod. "We're here today to begin proceedings in Weston versus Weston. Plaintiff, please proceed." Evan stepped forward. "Your Honor, we are here to present evidence that the decedent, Frank Weston, left intent for the estate to pass to his daughter, Rachel Weston, and that said intent was actively suppressed." He passed forward the items carefully. A cassette recording, time-stamped and verified. A handwritten note, dated 2 weeks before Frank Weston's death. A fax from a law office confirming an appointment to file a will. A statement from a witness. Claire Weston. The judge's eyes narrowed. All admitted, pending validation. Jason's attorney, a man with slicked-back hair and a confidence that bordered on arrogance, rose from his seat. Your Honor, while we acknowledge these items, we question their legitimacy and timing. These documents appeared after the estate was processed. We contend they are manufactured, possibly even forged, by a plaintiff with clear financial motive. Rachel felt her stomach churn, but she didn't flinch. Let them try. Claire was called to the stand. She wore her best Sunday dress, navy blue with small pearl buttons. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied as she spoke. I was present when Frank spoke about changing the estate, she said. He told me he wanted Rachel to have the house. He scheduled a legal appointment, and I received this fax confirming it. She held up the yellowed paper. Jason's attorney objected, but the judge waved it forward. Let the court determine admissibility. Then came the cassette. We request that the audio be heard in private session, Evan said. It contains deeply personal messages, but we believe it will confirm intent. The judge nodded again. Approved. The court will review in chambers. Linda remained silent. Even as the evidence was laid bare, she stared straight ahead, eyes unmoving. Not a flicker of guilt, not a word. Rachel found that more chilling than Jason's sneer. Jason finally stood. My father had plenty of time to file a will. He didn't. Everything else is speculation. She lived in the shed for months. Now she's trying to own the house? This is manipulation, not grief. Rachel didn't respond. She didn't need to. Evan approached her after the judge declared a short recess. We have momentum. The judge approved a handwriting analysis, and the audio will change everything. Outside the courtroom, a breeze stirred the flags lining the street. Rachel stood by the steps, staring at the cloudy sky. She didn't know what tomorrow would hold, but today she'd stood tall. The courthouse doors burst open behind her. Jason stomped down the stairs, fists clenched, tie loosened. You just made the worst mistake of your life, he growled, passing her without stopping. She didn't turn around, didn't flinch. She let the wind carry his threat away. Jason always thought he was smarter. But liars forget that the past remembers. It was the second day in court, but it felt like the 1,000th beat in a war Rachel had been fighting since the day her father died. The courtroom was colder this morning, or maybe that was just her skin beneath the layers of nerves. The light filtering through the tall windows didn't warm anything, least of all her resolve. She sat beside Evan, reviewing a new set of papers he had just pulled from his briefcase. His eyes sparkled, not from amusement, but precision, confidence. She knew that look. He had something. Tell me, she whispered. Evan tapped a corner of the document. The court clerk dug this up late last night after I filed an inquiry. The page was dry and clinical, an automated system log from the town archive database. But the lines of time-stamped activity were like footprints across the scene of a crime. It shows that Frank Weston scheduled a filing appointment for his will, Evan said, voice low. And then, 6 hours later, someone called to cancel it. The system logs the phone number. Rachel leaned closer. Her heart stuttered as she read the final entry. Canceled. Caller ID, Weston residence. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Court resumed. The judge, as measured as ever, took his seat. Mr. Harlan, you may proceed. Evan stepped forward, folder in hand. Your Honor, we'd like to introduce additional evidence. System records from the town legal archive. Specifically, the log detailing Mr. Frank Weston's original will filing appointment, and the source of its cancellation. He passed the log to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge's bench. Evan's voice remained calm. The appointment was scheduled 3 days before Frank's death. It was canceled by a call traced back to the Weston residence. At the time, Frank was ill and largely confined to bed. The call was placed from the main landline. He would have needed assistance to do so. The courtroom held its breath. Evan turned. We submit that this cancellation was not Frank's decision, but someone else's interference. And we believe this person had motive, proximity, and authority in the home at that time. Jason's attorney stood, objecting on procedural grounds, but the judge waved him off. We'll allow it. Let's hear from the plaintiff. Rachel rose, her voice steadier than her nerves. My father trusted someone to carry his intentions through, to do the right thing. He knew he was running out of time, but instead of helping him, someone erased him. She turned her gaze directly to Linda. He trusted you, she said, voice quiet but cutting. He asked for help, and you chose silence. Linda said nothing. She didn't blink, didn't twitch. Her hands remained folded in her lap, a picture of defiance sculpted in ice. Jason shifted in his seat. His leg bounced. His fingers tapped the wooden armrest. Then suddenly, he stood. This is ridiculous, he snapped. It was never supposed to be hers. The room fell into stunned silence. Evan's pen stopped mid-sentence. The judge looked up. Even the stenographer paused, eyes wide. Rachel's breath caught. Jason blinked as if he didn't realize he had spoken aloud. He tried to recover, but the damage was done. The sentence still echoed, louder than anything else spoken all week. It was never supposed to be hers. Linda closed her eyes just for a moment. The kind of blink that came with knowing the world had shifted and nothing would be the same again. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Weston, would you care to explain that remark? Jason opened his mouth, but for once, no words came out. The silence felt like a verdict. Rachel sat down, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from vindication. She didn't smile. Not yet. But something heavy in her chest loosened. Evan whispered beside her. That's your first crack in the wall. The judge rapped his gavel once. This court will reconvene tomorrow, and the truth will be weighed. A lie built on a lie always collapses. Sometimes all it takes is one breath to push it over. The headlines hit like a thunderclap, not just across town, but in the spaces between conversations, grocery lines, and morning coffees. Rachel Weston may win case new records suggest Will was tampered. The local newspaper, which once ran Jason's carefully worded PR narratives, now bore a new tone. Cautious, analytical, and strangely sympathetic to the woman who had once been written off as a bitter daughter living in a shed. Now, she was something else entirely. A whistleblower, a daughter wronged, a story. Rachel sat in Evan's office, sunlight creeping along the window blinds, striping the desk in narrow bars of gold. The office was silent, except for the occasional clicking of Evan's mouse as he refreshed his inbox. He was waiting for something. Rachel was too, though she couldn't name what. Claire entered with 2 cups of tea, the aroma of chamomile mingling with tension. I brought extra honey, she said softly, placing the cup in front of Rachel. Rachel smiled faintly. Thank you. I'm not sure I can taste anything today. You'll taste this one, Claire promised, her eyes warm despite the storm brewing outside. The door opened suddenly. Evan didn't look up. You're not going to believe this, he said, gesturing at his screen. Rachel leaned in. Jason's been removed as the temporary executor of the estate, Evan said. Court order issued an hour ago. The bank froze the transfer process. He no longer controls Weston Estate. The breath Rachel had been holding finally left her lungs. Just like that? Well, not just like that, Evan said. Takes weeks of work and a courtroom mic drop from his own mouth. But yes, it's happening. A heavy silence fell. Then came the second wave. Linda failed to show up for the next hearing. The judge fined her in absentia. Reporters began circling the Weston family like sharks, their tone shifting from curiosity to judgment. The woman who once orchestrated power plays in quiet halls was now holed up in silence, Rumor had it she had left town entirely, retreating to a lakeside cabin once owned by a cousin. One outlet even ran a side-by-side photo spread. Rachel in court, composed, eyes forward. Jason stepping out of a car, face flushed, caught mid-yell at someone on the phone. It was surreal. Claire set down a stack of envelopes in front of Rachel. "These are for you," she said. Letters from people in town. Some old neighbors, even a couple of strangers. Rachel opened the top one. Handwritten, shaky cursive. "I was wrong about you. You didn't deserve what they did. I'm sorry I listened to the wrong people." She folded it quietly, then opened another. And another. One was from her high school librarian. One from the woman who sold eggs at the farmer's market. It was more than sympathy. It was redemption. Just then, Evan's laptop pinged. He read the subject line, froze, then slowly turned the screen toward Rachel. Subject: voluntary withdrawal of claim, Linda Weston. Rachel read the body. In dry, formal language, it was all there. Linda's complete withdrawal from any claim to Weston Estate, effective immediately. She accepted no fault but agreed to step back in lieu of further legal investigation. "She doesn't want to go to trial," Evan said. "She knows the evidence would bury her reputation completely. This way, she walks away quietly." Rachel didn't say anything for a long moment. The words sank in like stones in a lake, slow and heavy. Claire whispered, "She'll lose everything else eventually. But this is the public death of her power." The room was still. Then Rachel spoke, more to herself than anyone. "Then it's over." Evan shook his head, gently but firmly. "Number you still need to choose what to do with it. Justice doesn't fix everything. It just clears the fog, so you can finally see the ruins." Rachel stood at the gates of Weston Estate. This time, no one called her name to stop her. No papers warned her to leave. No sidelong glance from a family member reminded her she didn't belong. The iron gate creaked open under her palm, and the gravel crunched beneath her shoes like it had when she was a child. Only then, her father had held her hand. The garden had overgrown. Once, symmetrical hedges now spilled into wild curls. The roses her mother used to pride herself on were untamed, blooming in scattered bursts like rebellious memories. The stone angel by the fountain had lost its nose. And yet, the place breathed familiarity. It was not warm, not forgiving, but known. Claire walked beside her, coat buttoned to the top, her expression unreadable. "You okay?" she asked. Rachel nodded, though her chest felt thick. It's like walking into a dream you forgot, and then remembered all at once. The front door had been locked, but Mr. Paul had keys. The old butler, silver hair neatly combed, eyes misty with time, met her at the entrance. He didn't say much at first, just took off his cap and bowed slightly. "Welcome home, Miss Rachel." She nearly cried. They moved through the halls together. The floors still groaned in the same spots. The wallpaper near the stairwell peeled where Jason once threw a basketball. The chandelier flickered overhead, dimmer now, like it too remembered the arguments, the silences, the decisions made behind closed doors. Rachel opened the door to her childhood bedroom. It had been changed. A guest room now. Pale blue instead of lavender. No posters, no glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Just a bed, a mirror, and the shell of who she used to be. She sat on the edge, hands folded in her lap. "I thought coming back would feel like winning, but it doesn't." Claire sat beside her. "Because it's not about winning. It's about surviving something that should have never been a battle." They wandered to the study, her father's room. The desk was still there. The same desk where she'd found the wooden key. The same one her mother had once told her was off-limits. She ran her hand across its surface. "He wasn't perfect," Rachel whispered, "but he tried." Claire touched her shoulder. "He did more than try. He chose you, even when he couldn't make the world see it." Rachel opened the bottom drawer. Empty now, but the weight of what had been there lingered. In the dining room, she paused. The long table still bore faint scratches from decades of use. She remembered sitting alone while Jason got the centerpiece seat. Remembered birthday cakes pushed to the side. Arguments over who inherited what, even before Frank died. "I don't want to live here," she said. Claire looked at her. "You don't have to." "I can't sell it either. That feels wrong." Claire nodded. "Then what?" Rachel looked out the window. The sun filtered through dust-streaked glass, lighting up the porch where her father used to drink coffee and talk to the birds. A place like this shouldn't stay empty, but it also shouldn't be someone's trophy. She turned back. "I want to turn it into a scholarship center for kids who come from messy families who never get to sit at the big table." Claire's breath caught. "In my father's name," Rachel continued, "not because he was perfect, but because he wanted better." Mr. Paul reappeared at the doorway. "That's a noble choice, miss." Rachel smiled faintly. "He would have hated the mess I made to get here." Claire grinned. "He also would have loved that you didn't back down." They spent the next hour mapping the house. Rachel took photos, scribbled notes, thought aloud about renovations. Not as a daughter reclaiming a lost home, but as someone trying to repurpose a wound. By evening, Claire departed, promising to return with old photos and a contact from a nonprofit who could help. Rachel stayed behind, walking once more through the garden as dusk colored the sky violet. On the front door, someone had taped a folded note. No name, no stamp. She opened it. "Your father would be proud. So am I." She looked around, but no one was in sight. The wind rustled the trees gently, like applause that had waited a long, long time to be heard. On the new brass plaque, it simply says, "The Frank Weston Foundation, founded by his daughter, Rachel." The late summer sun glinted off the polished metal as Rachel stood still for a moment, one hand resting gently on the wooden frame of the doorway. People were gathering inside. Some familiar, others new. A low hum of conversation floated out into the garden, where chairs had been arranged in tidy rows and a small podium stood waiting. It wasn't the same garden she had returned to weeks ago. The hedges had been trimmed, the overgrowth cleared. The fountain now flowed again, and the gravel paths had been swept clean. Life had returned. So had the community. Rachel adjusted the collar of her blouse, her eyes catching the sunlight dancing across the plaque. Frank Weston Foundation. No titles, no mentions of lawsuits or inheritance, just a name and the legacy it now represented. Claire joined her at the top step. "He'd like this." Rachel turned to her, heart tugging. "I think he would." Inside, Evan was flipping through a stack of papers, last-minute approvals, donation slips, media passes. He looked up as Rachel entered, a rare smile crossing his face. "It's done. All legal loose ends tied. Press is ready. Donors are impressed." She raised an eyebrow. "And you?" "I'm still wrapping my head around the fact that you turned a court case into a community movement." Claire chuckled. "You didn't just win, Rachel. You redirected the entire current villagers filed in, some who had once whispered, even doubted her. Now they shook her hand warmly. A retired teacher, a former neighbor. The grocery clerk who used to greet Linda with too much reverence. Mr. Paul had already taken his seat near the front, dabbing his eyes every few minutes. The room was quieting. Rachel took her place at the podium. She hadn't written her speech, she didn't want it rehearsed. She just wanted it to be real. She scanned the crowd. "I used to think inheritance was about money, or houses, or names engraved on mailbox posts. I was wrong." A pause. Not dramatic, just steady. "Some people inherit power. Others inherit silence. I inherited the fight to make it matter." A murmur rippled through the room. "I didn't ask to be in this position, but once I realized the truth, what my father left behind, what others tried to bury, I couldn't walk away." She looked toward Claire, then Evan. "This house, this place, it holds history. Not just mine. It holds potential. That's what we're here to protect. And from today on, it will be a space for others to build their own legacy. A scholarship center. A place of hope, not inheritance. A smattering of applause began, then grew stronger. After the event, as Rachel stood outside beneath the spreading branches of the oldest oak, she saw a figure in the distance. Tall, still, watching. Jason. He didn't move closer. He didn't wave. His hands were in his pockets, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Rachel thought he might approach, say something, even apologize. He didn't. He turned and walked away. Claire appeared beside her, eyes on the same departing silhouette. Maybe that's all he has left now. Rachel nodded, a quiet ache in her chest. Not bitterness, not even triumph. Just something like release. Evan joined them, holding a small envelope. A letter came through Foundation mail. No return address. Rachel took it. The handwriting was old-fashioned, familiar. She opened it carefully. Inside was a note. Only one line. You didn't just win. You changed everything. There was no signature, but something in the way it was written made her think of Mr. Paul. Or maybe someone else who had once believed in her from afar. As the last guests filtered out and the garden settled into its late afternoon stillness, Rachel remained by the door, fingers brushing the plaque again. She glanced at Claire, then back at the name. You gave me your name back, Dad. Now I'll carry it forward. What was once stolen in silence was reclaimed through persistence and truth. Rachel didn't just win a lawsuit. She dismantled a legacy of favoritism and lies, piece by piece. Justice, though delayed, arrived not with vengeance, but with purpose. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. If this story moved you, like, share, and comment below. Type 1 if you felt seen, or 2 if something still didn't sit right.